nose mask now. And if you don't have one, there's also one placed on your table. I've been informed that everything is sanitized and good to go. So your security, NBC says, is guaranteed. We begin with special recognition as we recognize the special guest of honor, who is the Honorable Minister of Information and Culture, ably represented here today by the Director, Entertainment and Creative Services, also a board member of the NBC. Please a round of applause for Mr. Augustus Babajide Ajibola. Thank you for being here. The chairman of the board of the commission, Alhaji Ikra Aliu Bilbis, is here also represented by Barrister Bamidele Aluko, also a member of the board. Please a round of applause for him. We acknowledge members of the board joining us virtually. We also want to very specially recognize the personality to deliver the 6th annual NBC lecture, an academic par excellence, a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations, NIPR, one of Nigeria's celebrated professors, well known as Nigeria's first female professor of mass communication, and unarguably a superwoman we can all be proud of. Please a round of applause for the keynote speaker, Professor Stella Chinyere Okunna. We also recognize Permanent Secretary of the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture, Deaconess Grace Isugekwe, who may be joining us also virtually. We recognize directors and former directors general who are also joining us virtually. But let me at this point recognize very, very specially the hosts, the acting director general of the NBC, a personification of professionalism. And many have described him as a square peg in a square hole, strongly on ground. As the acting director general of NBC is Professor Armstrong Idachaba. Please a round of applause for him. We recognize members of management staff of the NBC, live here and joining virtually. We also specially recognize our discussants here today. This panel of distinguished professionals made up of 2 wonderful ladies and distinguished gentlemen. And I will take the ladies first option, as we do know. I want to introduce on the panel, born first female elected chairperson, DGAR-TV Kanu, Mrs. Sa Ibrahim, live here with us. Thank you very much. Also, we have the delectable voice, one of Nigeria's foremost and frontline female broadcast journalists, multi-award winning multimedia strategist and broadcast executive. A round of applause for Mrs. Eugenia Abu, live and here with us. On the panel, we have a distinguished academic, celebrated professor of mass communication, University of Maiduguri, all the way from the northeast Borno State. Professor Gambo Ibrahim is here with us. Also on the panel, we have a notable and fearless voice, senior broadcast journalist on AIT, Dr. Amechi Anakwe. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, to unveil the content of the panelists, we have a content director himself, former director, Public Affairs NBC, as moderator, Malam Awalu Salihu is live and here with us. Let me very specially acknowledge joining us virtually, and you will see their faces, all the faces of their representatives shortly. Dr. Mansour Liman, Director General FRCN, Yakubu Ibn Muhammad, Director General NTA, Osita Okechukwu, Director General Voice of Nigeria, Namdi Jamenze, Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Press Council. Other administrators who are joining us virtually are all recognized. Please a round of applause for them. We also recognize ambassadors, captains of industry, CEOs, and civil society giants, representatives of ministries also joining us here, distinguished staff of the NBC, gentlemen of the vibrant Nigerian press, very, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen. NBC partners today with the event being covered by FRCN, NTA, AIT, Channels Television, TVC, ITV, Women FM, and other stations live. A round of applause for them, please. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Helen Keller, in one of her quotes, says, "Alone we can do so little, and together we can do so much." That's why we're gathered here together today, here and there, virtually, as good hearts and good heads, to join the NBC virtually and live, because of the situation. We have now obeyed the new normal to ensure that things are done right. And the grace this occasion, virtually, we have a lot of people and we have a few gathered here. Every year, the Commission painstakingly examines contemporary contents and currents of social-political developments in our country. This started exactly 5 years ago. 2015, we had Mr. Shola Taylor as the guest. We had in 2016, Atairu Jega, professor, as the guest speaker. In 2017, we had Professor Adesomi and the presence of the eminent Sultan of Sokoto at the event. In 2018, it was all about ethno-cultural divide, and Professor Ibrahim Gambari, who is presently Chief of Staff to the President, handled that lecture. 2019 saw Professor Ahmed Adam Okene of the Nigerian Defense Academy talking on contemporary challenges of the Nigerian state. And yes, it's the 6th annual lecture of the National Broadcasting Commission, NBC. 2020 reflects the times and disruptions caused by the coronavirus pandemic. The theme, therefore, is broadcasting reforms and the coverage of crises, emergencies, and disasters. Your Excellencies, Honorable Minister, members of the board, the chairman of the board, members of the National Assembly, ministers, commissioners, members of the academia, Lord Spiritual and Temporal Highnesses, future leaders, students who may also be joining us virtually, and distinguished guests, welcome once again to the 6th edition of the NBC Annual Lecture 2020. Take a moment to say hello to somebody, but do it in social distance measure. Greet someone in your language. Don't touch. If you touch, you may be arrested. Thank you very much. Welcome. I must say it's an honor and privilege to be here. My name is Tokwe Ujime of Africa's largest radio network, Radio Nigeria. If you clap for me, I'll be glad. Thank you very much. Let me, at this point, welcome the gentleman to give us the welcome address, and timely we will make this event. As you know, it's virtually also being covered. Alhaji Ikra Aliu Bilbis will be coming up shortly. But let me inform you that, as I said earlier, a lot of people are watching online. And for those who are joining us virtually, you have opportunity to send your questions in writing. Just send questions on the platforms wherever you are joining us from on the social media. The questions will be attended to. And this lecture will be one you will not want to forget in a hurry. Now, let's welcome to give the welcome address representing Alhaji Ikra Aliu Bilbis, Board Chairman of the Commission. Please a round of applause for Barrister Bamidele Aluko.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the welcome address by Alhaji Aliu Ikra Bilbis, the Chairman Board of National Broadcasting Commission, NBC, Abuja, who is unavoidably absent today. And my name is Barrister Saliu Bamidele Aluko. I stand in this place to read his address. Now, the Honorable Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, ably represented by our own, my colleague at the board, Augustus Babajide Ajibola, Director of Entertainment and Creative Service, in the Ministry of Information and Culture. The Acting Director General of NBC, Professor Armstrong Ndachaba. Our erudite keynote speaker, Professor Chinyere Okunna, and our well-resourced discontent. Member of the NBC board who are watching us on virtual, and member of the NBC management that are here present, and those that are watching us on virtuals. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, distinguished stakeholders and other participants joining us via the virtual platform. I'm delighted and especially welcome you to this abridged celebration of the 28th anniversary of the National Broadcasting Commission, which we are commemorating with the annual lecture. This is the 6th in the series. We are not able to gather this year to celebrate the giant's industry stride as we have undertaken over the last 1 year. There's a Nigerian proverb that says, when a lizard drops from a high height, it nods its head in self-appraise. In spite of the disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, I think it is just fear, and we pat ourselves on the back, first for surviving the scourge, and secondly, for the strategic role the broadcast media is playing in educating the Nigerian people on the pandemic and in dousing its effects. The media is playing a key role in entrenching true democracy and broadcasting in the value chain. In addition, the idea of sustainable development and governance will be a mirage without an effective media. Mass mobilization is also dependent on effective media usage. So it is important and advantageous that we support the National Broadcasting Commission in furthering and sustaining a professional and citizen-focused broadcast media. The digitization of the broadcast industry, one of the major projects of government through the Commission, is on course. The board has charged management to come up with a new map road. This, I assure you, will soon be released to the public. The Commission has achieved laudable goals for the industry through 28 years of grooming. There's no doubt that there are still challenges to be surmounted in the industry. I therefore utilize this opportunity to call on all stakeholders to close ranks and put our best foot forward in developing an industry that is resilient and can stand the test of time. We may be lagging behind some other countries that came into broadcasting long after Nigeria, but I trust the Nigerian spirit that we can overcome obstacles and take back our proper pride of place in the immediate future. Some of the solutions that will be provided at this annual lecture will be useful in helping us to reach our desired goals. I thank you for making out time from your very busy, important schedules to celebrate with the NBC. I will leave the podium now for the erudite scholar and discussant to whet your appetite with the well-researched ideas and discussions that will follow. I pray that Almighty Allah will give us the wisdom and strength for more successes in future. Amen. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you very much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a breather as we will observe some health talk on COVID-19. But just before then, let me quickly recognize joining us from the... Okay, I will get the correction of the name shortly. But I'm told we have some persons joining us from some other ministries, and we'll get their names very, very shortly. Now, we'll have a health talk on COVID-19, and we want to welcome Dr. Dayo David Ajibade of Brain and Body Foundation, Abuja, to give this health talk on COVID-19. Please a round of applause for him.
Good morning, everyone. All protocols duly observed. I do want to say a big thank you to the NBC for this opportunity, especially Mrs. Franca Ayetu and her team, who have worked very, very hard, and of course, Mrs. Folake Ehile. Thank you again. So I've been told I have only 7 minutes, so we're going to make this as to the point as possible. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed a lot of things. We're now talking more about multiple pandemics. We think about, obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic, but also the financial crisis. We're also talking about the mental health crisis. We're even looking at things like sex abuse, home abuse, sex abuse among young children. It's a very, very big problem. But in spite of the size and the enormity of this problem, the fundamentals, in my opinion, must remain the fundamentals. We cannot lose sight of the fundamentals and how that affects how we think, how we behave, how we organize as a country. And it's also very important that we realize that because we're in a black nation, we need to understand that there are certain things that we as black people, and Nigeria being the #1 black country in the world, we need to understand some things that we must take into careful account when it comes to our health as a nation. And I think nothing is more important than the immune system, and COVID-19 has brought that to light, probably more than anything else, that the importance of your immune system is critical, not just when it comes to infectious diseases. It's critical when it comes to brain health. It's critical when it comes to other forms, other conditions. And I'm going to quickly look at these things and kind of show you what it is. There are two main things that COVID-19 has pointed out: immune incompetence and immune dysfunction. And I'm going to show you that with a diagram real quick. So here we have in front of us a diagram, and there are 3 stages. You see the numbers on the top. What COVID-19, let's start with the first part, stage 1. So face masks prevent against the COVID-19 coming upon your body, on your person. So you face masks, social distancing, all the things that we're supposed to do, but that's just the first step. Thankfully, only 80% of those who contract the virus develop mild symptoms. Thankfully, 80% develop the mild symptoms like cough, catarrh, loss of smell, loss of taste, loss of sore throat. And thankfully, about within a week, that's all over. Now, those who are immunocompromised, or those who don't have a robust enough immune system, progress to stage 2, where it gets to the lungs, and it causes all kinds of problems from chest pain to fever and malaise. Fortunately, some of these still recover. Now, the worst part is really when it becomes systemic, and we see that up there, 6%. 6% have this systemic problem. And COVID-19 is called the Great Invader, and it's not without reason, because it attacks so many parts of the body. And it's not really the virus itself that causes the damage. And this is what brings us to the importance of the immune system. It's a person's own immune system. That volume, somebody says I need more volume. Okay, is that better? It is the person's own immune system that causes the damage, not the virus itself. Just like a matchstick is not what causes a total brush fire, it's a person's. Can you hear me now? All right. So it's a person's own immune system that causes the damage. And so that's very, very important that we need to look at. Let me quickly go back here. So I show some nutrients at the bottom here, vitamin C and zinc, We're seeing that these are so important. The whole thing about the hydroxychloroquine, you all heard about it. There's this huge controversy about it. It's not the hydroxychloroquine that does the work. It's the zinc that does the work of destroying the virus. What hydroxychloroquine does is that it opens the door for the zinc to do what it needs to do. And so it's unfortunate there's been such a big rage about it. In Nigeria, until recently, they were still using hydroxychloroquine and zinc in the isolation centers. So I want to talk about dealing with this last stage, which is the death, and the system being COVID-19 being a systemic invader. I feel the nutrient that is particularly important to us black people that I don't think we're giving enough attention to. This nutrient, it regulates over 2,000 genes in the body, which means that it affects a lot of things, most especially immune function, bone strength, muscle strength, and a few other things. Those who are deficient in this gene, those who are deficient in this nutrient, remember we said it affects over 2,000 genes. Those who are deficient in this nutrient tend to have lower back pain. Women have more fibroids, frequent malaria. I know patients who, if they keep telling me they have malaria every month, I say check your nutrient status, levels of that nutrient. And that nutrient is vitamin D3. Remember I said specifically D3, I didn't say D2. And what vitamin D3 does in this whole COVID-19 palaver is that it addresses what is known as the cytokine storm. Everybody say that with me. Cytokine storm. That's good. Again, cytokine storm. Better. And what studies around the world have found out is that those who have the lowest levels of vitamin D, this is around the world, those who have the lowest levels of vitamin D are the ones more likely to have the more severe form of the disease. And they are more likely to die. And we're talking about over 95%. So back to this picture. What vitamin D has been shown to do is that it helps to suppress, helps to regulate, because its main function, one of its main functions is to regulate the immune system. It helps to suppress the cytokine storm, which eventually is what kills most patients. So who is at risk of the deficiency? Well, if you're looking, I think everybody here is dark-skinned. So let me just put it this way. If you're not a farmer, if you're not working out in the fields for long hours in a day, if you're not a street hawker, you are most likely, if you're not cognizant of this fact, you are most likely to be deficient. And so I've mentioned some of these other things. Diseases are also a big factor. Diabetes. I point to the big four. I'm trying to rush. I point to the big four because we're looking at hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and of course, if you have a lung condition. These are the big four that make you more susceptible to a severe form of the disease. If you're not out in the sun regularly, please go and check your vitamin D levels. It's a very, very good bet that you are low in vitamin D. I mean, I work with executives, and almost without exception, they have low in vitamin D. Why? They go from AC to AC to AC to AC. All right, so we need to be aware of this. In conclusion, I want to say this, that this may not be the last pandemic. We hope it is, but we can only hope it may not be the last one. There will be other problems, there will be other infections, there will be other health crises. But the basics we need to remember, that the basics will always be the basics. And it behooves us as leaders, it behooves us as a nation to think about focusing on the basics, think about strengthening the immune systems of our population. Because when the vaccine comes, and hopefully we'll get to it, then everybody, it will be an add-on. It will not be the be-all, end-all. But the immune system will always be here to stay. So with that, I want to leave you. Again, I want to say thank you to the NBC for this opportunity. God bless.
Thank you very much, Dr. David Dayo Ajibade. Well, I wouldn't know what you think, but would you have recommended we have this program in the sun? Maybe it will protect us. Thank you very much once again. Well, it's great that here in Africa we do have the sun. And we do hope this COVID-19 thing finds its way out. I heard, if I didn't hear anything, I heard that zinc opens a certain door. I hope the door is the way out and not the way in. Really, I think Nigerians would want, whether zinc or whatever it is, just show the thing the way out. Am I right? The yes have it. It's time to invite, for the opening address, the guest of honor, Honorable Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, is ably represented by a board member of the commission and Director, Entertainment and Creative Services. Please welcome Mr. Augustus Babajide Ajibola to speak to us.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm reading this address on behalf of our Honorable Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed. Mr. Chairman, ably represented by my friend, Barrister Bamidele Aluko. My good friend, the acting DG of NBC, Professor Armstrong Idachaba, distinguished keynote speaker and discussants, ladies and gentlemen. Permit me to first congratulate the National Broadcasting Commission on its 28th anniversary. Indeed, NBC has come of age from infancy to puberty and what I will call full maturity, but is still growing in terms of knowledge base, infrastructure, and acquiring cutting-edge technology in broadcasting. However, it is always an honor and privilege for me to discuss anything that has to do with communication, more so when it is broadcasting. A medium that has translated from an elitist paraphernalia to that of a people's platform for verbal and visual expression. Since the colonial days, broadcasting through rediffusion has always played a pivotal role between the government and the governed. Ever since, it has remained the umbilical cord between the government and the governed. Do we agree with me that these are trying times? But the ultimate challenge of the time is that of the innate ability of man to delve into his inner will and creative ingenuity to transform his surroundings into a friendly and habitable environment. More so, the COVID-19 pandemic has made what is trying times to be more engaging. In man's bid to find an everlasting panacea to deal with this virus in temporary times before a permanent solution is found. The task of NBC in regulating our dynamic and vibrant broadcasting industries is indeed an arduous task that requires the intricate skills of a consumer policy-making network that has the people as its ultimate beneficiaries. Writ large, it is greatest good for the greatest number of people. In this respect, monopolistic tendencies should not be allowed to drive the higher echelon of our broadcasting industry. I'm yet to see any client or country where a behemoth is allowed to dictate consumer idiosyncrasies, taste, and even disposable income. That is the thrust of our abhorrence of exclusivity, as it is against the natural law of nature to allow unbridled capitalism and unfettered domination. That is why we have antitrust laws against monopoly companies, because might is not right, and that material strength should not be allowed to the detriment of the larger good of the society. The federal government is currently implementing the reform of the broadcasting industry. It is therefore our expectation that these changes will revolutionize broadcasting in Nigeria. As part of the reforms, it has become necessary to effect certain amendments to the broadcasting code. The amendments were initiated by a Federal Executive Council decision, which reviewed the 2019 elections and several recommendations that were approved by Mr. President to reposition NBC to perform its regulatory role better. The approval necessitated some amendments in the code and the act. The amendments are mostly in the areas of political broadcasting, local content, coverage of emergencies, advertising, and anti-competitive behavior. There are obviously lots of positive and desirable outcomes from the new broadcasting code. The provisions on exclusivity and monopoly, this antitrust provision will boost local content and local industry due to laws prohibiting exclusive use of rights by broadcasters whose intent is to create monopolies and hold us hostage. At implementation, it will encourage open access to premium content. I must explain that this provision is not new in Nigeria. Broadcasting exclusivity was disallowed at a certain time in the history of broadcasting. I recall multi-choice sub-licensing EPL, English Premier League, matches to other local operators in Nigeria. I also recall ITV engaging several local operators on sub-licensing the EPL when they got the rights. Sub-licensing and rights sharing create opportunities for local operators to also gain traction and revenue for their services. More than this, the law prohibiting backlog of advertising debts will definitely promote sustainability for the station owners and producers of content. More than anything else, the law on registration of web broadcasting grants the country the opportunity to regulate negative foreign broadcasts that can harm us as a nation. Such harm could be security, protection for minors and of human dignity, economic fraud, privacy, and etc. The provisions on responsibility of broadcast stations to devote airtime to national emergency obviously mandates mandates terrestrial and pay TV channels to make their services available to Nigerians at time of national emergencies like this for their education and enlightenment. We shall always count on your support and understanding of Nigerian people. Broadcasting remains a major, if not the most critical tool for national development. Our expectation is that broadcasting should be used to demonstrate governance in Nigeria, good governance in Nigeria. We should avoid the temptation of letting our emotions get the better of us by being purveyors of hate speech and divisive rhetoric. That is not in our culture. We are known as civilized and controlled people with ethical values that emphasizes tolerance, chastity, understanding, temperance, and respect for other people. Every policy initiative should evolve out of deep and cerebral thinking, critical analysis, and qualitative ratio of what is good for the majority of our people, no more, no less. It is our duty to curb unbridled passions and rapacious instinct of those who think one is all. A tree can never make a forest, and our collective will in terms of creating competitive playing field for all is our unflinching resolve. I must thank you for the support in educating and conscientizing the public on the ills of the pandemic. That is an act of patriotism, and we encourage you to keep it up. The government will continue to find ways to support you to serve your roles. The recent license fee waiver and discount is one of such. The onus is on you to provide this show of support by government by promoting the national interest and not self-interest always. Finally, political broadcasting remains a big challenge in Nigeria. Broadcasting stations allow a lot of inciting and unguided comments. This is dangerous for our collective growth as a country. Why do we allow ethnic affiliations and religious bigotry to preclude our sense of nationhood and unity as a people? Why should we allow falsehood, misleading claims, and fake news to thrive? This must stop in national interest. We are key concerned of the destiny of the country, and we know that hold our nation's destiny in our hands. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Representative of the Honorable Minister.
A very good morning. Thank you for being with the Nigerian Television Authority, the largest network in Africa. You've been on to a live telecast of the 6th Annual Lecture 2020 of the National Broadcasting Commission, live from the city of Abuja, the nation's capital, on a Monday morning, and the weather has been clement. And it is a program by the National Broadcasting Commission, bringing stakeholders to discuss issues on the way forward to moving the broadcast industry forward. You just listened to a speech from the representative of the Honorable Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed. And the message has been instructive, challenging stakeholders to do what is right, putting patriotism in focus, and also to address issues that has to do with hate speech, issues that have to do with emerging challenges, and the broadcast industry, and the message he said will always be there, and government on its part will also do what is necessary to ensure that stakeholders are always carried along, and putting in mind that the broadcast industry is an integral part of the development of the country. And today, a lot has been programmed on this event, and very soon we will be listening to a keynote presentation by Professor Chinyere Okunna. So please do stay back and listen attentively. I am Abdullahi Ajia, welcoming you once more.
So let me also say, if you want to clap for a man, you do it manly. But you see, for a woman, it has to be very well. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this lady, a professor of mass communication in Nigeria, has been teaching mass communication at Nnamdi Azikiwe University since 1994. In addition to serving in various administrative positions, which include Director UNIZIC, Female Dean of the Faculty, Head of Department of Mass Communication. She's cut her feet in the non-academic area, having served His Excellency Governor Peter Obi in various capacities. He served as 3-time commissioner. She served as Chief of Staff. She was also Chair Millennium Development Goals MDG Implementation Committee and Chair Anambra State Committee. In the education and professional affiliation, Professor Okunna was educated both in Nigeria and in the United Kingdom. I'm proud to tell you that she had her first degree from the only major, powerful university, the University of Nigeria. There's only one of it. Let's not do the argument now. It's just about the facts. If you want to clap, do it very well. From the University of Nigeria, she also had MA from Center of Mass Communication Research, University of Leicester, United Kingdom, and went on to have other professional qualifications, including Fellow, Nigerian Institute of Public Relations, NIPR. In the academic, she has done extremely well. Professor Okunna has been assessor for many academics aspiring to the position of professor and reader in mass communication. Just before this event, a gentleman, one of my colleagues, journalist Chidoka, told me that he had the privilege of having Professor Okunna supervise his project. And he moves with pride that he graduated in beautiful honors. According to him, if you have Professor Okunna as your supervisor, you must be ready to study and study very hard. This lady has also served in consultancy at the UNESCO, UNFPA, UNICEF, and other international body. It doesn't stop there. For philanthropy, Professor Okunna has had positive impact in touching lives, members of our constituency in various ways. Endowment Fund at the University of Nnamdi Azikiwe University, and in her tenure as commissioner. For her good work, she's had recognitions and awards. Professor Stella Okunna has been awarded chieftaincy titles, including the title of Kpakpando, which means star, from the Igwe Council of our home community, Ukpo, in 2003, making her the first honorary female member of the council and Igwe's cabinets. You need to clap very well. Your Excellencies, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is this woman of honor, an academic par excellence, a great woman who continues to make Nigeria proud that we have today as our keynote speaker. Please welcome, with a resounding round of applause, Professor Chinyere Stella Okunna.
Good morning, everybody. Is it still morning or afternoon? All right. The protocol has been brilliantly established, so I'll stand on it, if you allow me. You know, when I speak on occasions like this, it gives me great joy. I begin by commending, like everybody has done, the NBC for organizing this. But I'm not surprised. It's going well. Because like I said at the end of my lecture, with a thoroughbred professional like Armstrong Idachaba at the helm of affairs, and the kind of powerful board you have here, I didn't expect anything less. So commendations, NBC, for what you're doing. You know, one advantage of a keynote speaker, you don't have to say everything. You raise the issues, and the discussants will go there and battle it out. And I'm going to do that now. I'll begin by stating the very obvious, all of us know, that the media are powerful. Who doesn't know that? The media, in whatever capacity, whether they are traditional media, the same traditional in quotes of radio, TV, or the new media. And honestly, each time I think somebody like me, we are racing towards the end of our retirement in active academics. It's been a long and glorious career. And I was alive and working when when TV was called a very powerful modern media. Now that powerful media, your medium, you're now calling it traditional media because somebody more powerful is on the block. So the media are powerful, even at that level. And it has become incontrovertible that media, particularly at the information level, they may not always have the power to change our beliefs and attitudes. But at the information level, nothing is more powerful than the media. In whatever capacity, like I said earlier, all forms of media are important and powerful. The mass media as organs of information dissemination to a very large and heterogeneous audiences, that one of their advantages, have tremendous power and influence in shaping public opinion and perception. Happens every day. In the modern world, I need to repeat this, no other organ, no other establishment has the capacity to gather, package professionally, and disseminate efficiently as the media. And that's where journalists are really preeminent. The power of the media derives mainly from the fact that they are molders of society and they possess capacity to determine to various degrees how media audiences perceive social reality through the media's agenda-setting function and status-conferring capabilities. And one thing, agenda-setting we all know, by simply placing something on the media agenda, it becomes almost compulsory to be noticed. That is why constantly, like we're going to do today, the COVID-19 must be on the media agenda continuously in very innovative ways. For status conferral, by simply being mentioned in the media, you become important. When when a new president comes on board, new ministers, nobody knows them, but by being mentioned, the media will confer status and legitimacy on them over the years. These are the things that have made the media really powerful. Then with the advent of the social media, the power has been magnified to unimaginable proportions. The social media have changed the way information flows and they have shattered the linear flow of information. As a result of the internet, most media outputs are now released online, meaning that they can be read and viewed from anywhere in the world through the internet. And as new media technology provides easy access to varieties of information anytime, anywhere. Remember, I'm merely stating the obvious. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't know all this, but we need to repeat them to set the scene. Now, to what we are here to do, the broadcast media, if the media are as powerful as that, think about the power of broadcasting. But there are unique capabilities and functions. By utilizing audio and video technology, broadcasting has become capable of reaching audiences simultaneously, availing, I don't like mankind, humankind, with the best means of information dissemination and reception. NBC, it is humankind, not mankind. Then the advent of media convergence, and we all know that. All the media are converging. It's just like when you are on a bench and somebody comes in, you don't get up and go away. You move a bit, and the other person is accommodated. So all the media, people keep saying, will newspapers die? Will radio die because the internet is there? None of them is dying. There's convergence. Everybody has some kind of space in that collectivity. So with that convergence now, and the multiplicity of internet-based social media devices, service delivery has become magnified, magnifying the power of broadcasting also. Now, the advantage of convergence is that these new platforms provide a means of significantly extending services at low cost, coefficiencies, and thus drawing many people into the consumption pool. That's your acting DG saying that. The term global village, remember when it was coined? I think in the 80s or 70s? Global village was coined by McLuhan. It didn't really make much sense then. It is now that we are seeing the media as global village with the advent of the media. So the terms global village and new world information order, which were coined in the 1980s, they fit better now. Now that the converged communication platform has made them become a reality. It is this awesome power. Hope you understand the background. It is this awesome power that we must harness to tackle crises, emergencies, particularly the COVID-19 pandemic. Are we doing that? Right. Let us use the most basic definitions of our keywords: crisis, disasters, emergencies. And I've gone to even the lowest denominator of using a dictionary to say a crisis is a time of great danger, difficulty, or confusion when problems must be solved or important decisions must be made. A disaster, similarly, is an unexpected event that kills a lot of people or causes a lot of damage. And an emergency is a sudden, serious, and dangerous event or situation which needs immediate action to deal with it. If you look at all these, next slide. If you look at all these, what disaster, what emergency, what crisis do you think epitomizes all this? COVID-19. Nigeria and the world have had their share of crises. In Nigeria here, religious crisis, political crisis, economic crisis, all manner of crises. So we are not really immune to crisis. But the coronavirus surpasses all these crises. That is why today, even though I'm being asked to speak about crises, emergencies, and everything in context of broadcast reforms, I am going to roll all those crises and emergencies and everything, disasters into COVID-19. So our discussion today is epitomized by that virus. Is that okay? All right. What is the status of, I'm talking about reforms now. What is the status of reforms in the broadcasting sector in Nigeria? How have the reforms affected broadcasting in Nigeria? Have the reforms repositioned broadcast stations for effective service delivery, such as coverage of crises, disasters, and emergencies, as exemplified by coronavirus? This is what we are here today to discuss. Reforms in Nigeria's broadcasting sector began with the deregulation of broadcasting. And that was years ago. So when people think about reform, they think it's what is going on now. It began when the country found the courage to say, no, all media, broadcast media cannot be owned and controlled by government. And once they deregulated, they freed so many voices. And that is the beginning of reforms. And when they did this, this broke the yoke of government monopoly ownership and control. And it introduced private ownership of broadcast media in the country and was occasioned by the enactment of the national. We all know this. Before then, there was no private ownership. Even universities that wanted to establish teaching broadcast stations were not allowed to do that. They were not government owned, so to say. So here we are now. Now, this singular moment is ushered in production, distribution, utilization of large volumes of radio and television programs on different levels. There was a multiplicity of voices. There was democratization of broadcasting. And that's one thing you cannot do without tackling any emergency. Broadcasters can use the flexibility gained from deregulation, particularly of operating small radio and television stations, to address tailor-made programs to audiences of any size. Community radio, campus radio. These are things that have been freed to address emergencies. Programs may be explicitly produced to allow audience participation, which also promotes democratic principles through active participation. I like this one because today I'm going to talk about behavior change communication. It is not just broadcasters who are going to control this. You must give voice to opinion leaders to come out and tell us that this COVID is real. I'll get to that eventually. Because where I come from, many people don't believe that's COVID-19. Many people are doubting it. They say it's what government is using to collect money from international communities. So we must have broadcasters sharing broadcasting platforms with lay people who have influence on their communities to speak or to be interviewed. More and more if you're already doing that. Then for city dwellers, the greatest asset of deregulation is that there are many voices, I've already said, and this provides a variety of choices. Independent city-based radio and television stations are also best placed to serve as the watchdogs of the media. This also provides a variety of viewpoints and a variety of continuing education, which the media at all times must handle. In terms of many voices on air, I think the NBC has achieved that with the regulation. With hundreds of radio and TV stations, privately owned, government-owned, community and everything operating at all levels in Nigeria, the gains of regulation have indeed been magnificent. Nigeria has not less than 320 radio stations, including as many as 60 functional campus community radio stations, and are doing a great job. Even television, with this elitist orientation, we know what that means. TV already has more than 103, that could be more, in Nigeria. In the southeast alone, where I come from, there are at least 53 licensed radio stations at 13 television stations in the southeast alone. Given this situation, the objective of NBC reforms, that's the section, has apparently been achieved. And this section says to maintain and promote fair and efficient market conduct and effective competition in the broadcast industry, to prevent the misuse of monopoly or market power or anti-competitive and unfair practices. Broadcasters or licensees are prohibited from entering into any form of agreement that will limit competition. These are gains of broadcasting that we must harness for what we are doing now. Reforms, that is, so the first class of reforms is deregulation. Second part of reforms, in terms of digitization of broadcasting, that's the next platform now where you're now trying to work strong also. And because technological innovations make it possible to send text and video virtually and unlimitedly, making radio, television signals available online and without geographical, that's what digitization is doing now. This is what convergence is all about. Trends in digitization are equally evident in broadcast technology as hardware, equipment, and digital cameras. All the paraphernalia of digital broadcasting are there, all freed by the singular motion which the NBC is taking now. Indeed, the development of digital media, the rise of the internet, and the proliferation of mobile devices have combined to split open the very significance of media in various ways. As is the case with deregulation, digitization as an aspect of broadcast reforms in Nigeria has yielded abundant harvests. Radio and TV stations across the country are valiantly rising to the challenge of digital broadcasting. So if you look at all your stations around now, people are complying with digitization. They are striving to make sure they are doing digital broadcasting, but there are still gaps, and I'm sure the NBC knows that. And let me take Anambra State. where I come from, as an example. Through observation and conversations with core staff of broadcasting stations in the state, we know that Anambra State Broadcasting Service, Radio Nigeria, NTA, Purity FM, through other private media like Ogene FM, which is then Channel Television, to Unizik Campus Radio, all of them are digitizing. All of them have the following platforms, variety of media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. There are all their signals are being sent out. That's added power where you can reach people. ABS is already doing live streaming, and I understand NTA will start live streaming next month, which is imminent. Channels TV, I understand by interviewing their correspondents there, they say their news delivery comes through various media to ensure accessibility at all times. I agree. Live streaming via Skype is deployed by reporting events live, making for spontaneity. Telephone connections, channel TV can be watched with smartphones, iPad, or computers. This should be ultimately the goal of every broadcast station, small or large, eventually when you achieve your overall goal. Similarly, you can see that ABS is on all those platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is there, streaming live, and then all the mobile apps. That is digitization. And if you look at that, in compliance with the provisions of Chapter 12, what is happening in Anambra State is happening all over the Southeast at various levels. Not all of them. Although we are seeing a rejection in some stations of online information. They say that's fake news. Maybe you frighten them too much. That they say that's fake news. So many of them reject the use of information from the internet, which is, I think, a bit dangerous. They should be used with caution. And all that, I've said all that mainly. That means we are achieving digitization. Now let us go to what brought us here today. Coverage by broadcasting of crisis. Now we all know what crisis communication is. Crisis communication is a special aspect of communication. For any broadcasting system to be well positioned for effective crisis communication in this information age, the use of the vast array of communication technologies is indispensable. This is one reason why the NBC reforms in the broadcasting sector are of immense value, because increased technological possibilities can be used to social advantage. In acknowledging the centrality of information technologies in the coverage of crises, disasters, and emergencies, the NBC Code makes reference to such technologies in a number of ways. 1, broadcast technology enables broadcasters to bring Class B information on issues of national concern. And if anything is of national concern, it is this COVID pandemic. Broadcasters using social media sources or any emerging technologies for coverage of disasters and emergencies shall ensure the veracity and credibility. If you enforce this, there wouldn't be too much fear of using online material. I should be aiming for this. Broadcasters in using social media sources or any emerging technologies shall ensure due caution. So the NBC has put in the safeguards. And I think with all these stipulations, the broadcast media should be bold to harness the powers of everything about digital broadcasting. Now, effective communication is right at the center of any effort to manage a crisis, disaster, or emergency. Every crisis calls for relevant information, and this information can only be provided through effective crisis communication concerning information that is exchanged before, during, and after a crisis. I'm not sure we had enough time or preparation before this crisis. So we're talking about ongoing now and after the crisis has ravaged the world. The media, being among the society's watchdogs, should assume the responsibility of promptly and accurately reporting such disasters, as well as the crisis and emergency that they unleash on society. Again, going back to the NBC code, it underscores this importance of relevant and timed information when it says, in drawing attention to the crisis, timely, basic information shall be provided to assist the public and ensure rescue. However, the provision of such information in crisis situations may not be possible and proactive if broadcasters do not have the technological capacity to deliver fast. This underscores the relevance of the availability and application of new media technology in broadcasting as being championed by the NBC. We are now getting towards the end. How is Nigeria's reformed or reforming broadcasting system faring in its coverage of crisis by taking COVID-19? How are the numerous federal, state, community, and private broadcasting stations in the country using the array of information technologies in line with the provisions of Section 1.2 of the code that says broadcast technology enables broadcasters to bring information on issues of national concern? How are they using that paraphernalia? How are broadcast stations complying with the NBC stipulation that such technology should be used with caution and responsibility? Are we doing that? Now, like I keep saying, there are clear indications that Nigeria's broadcasting stations are disseminating COVID-19 containment messages on all their media platforms. They are constantly updating daily reports from the NCDC concerning the virus in Nigeria generally and in individual states. They're doing this. These media are also actively mobilizing citizens using local language, pidgin, and English on COVID-19 preventive measures such as hand washing and the rest of them. Stations are also awash with all manner of jingles, beautiful jingles, sung in all kinds of languages. They are doing this. This multimedia approach has helped in underscoring the role of broadcasting in crisis management and national development, and position the broadcast media as an indispensable tool in every development plan. Given this scenario, broadcast media are apparently substantially complying with the stipulations of the NBC code on coverage of crises, emergencies, and disasters. This is where we need to talk some more. The amended code, as shown, is doing quite well. It has done a lot. These are benefits of new media technologies whose potentials Nigerian broadcasters must harness. The code and the NBC have performed incredibly well in realizing these potentials and deserve commendation. However, there are pertinent questions. Is the media's performance in obeying the NBC code about drawing attention by providing basic information enough? Is it adequate? Should the provision of basic information be enough to ensure effective coverage of a pandemic like COVID-19? The answer to this question is no. We need to do more than basic information. We need to go beyond this step to a higher level. There should be more to the coverage, and the NBC needs to rise to the challenge of getting broadcasting stations to find the courage to take the next steps in their coverage of COVID-19. The daily reeling out of numbers of infections, and they're doing that brilliantly, deaths and discharged patients is not enough. Neither is the saturation of the airwaves with beautiful jingles. That is not enough. In doing just these, the coverage of COVID-19 pandemic is too laid back. We'll take a few examples, just one or two. One, it is common knowledge. Maybe I came into Abuja and I was deeply impressed about the way they are complying. Nigerians are acting as if the virus is no threat to them, or as if the virus does not even exist. Such Nigerians can be seen at markets. I don't know what markets here look like. If you go to a typical Nigerian Igbo market, you will see social distancing being abused roundly. You can see them at burials. My people do huge burials. A prominent man died recently. Come and see the crowd. And sometimes you can't even control them. And also go to churches and mosques or religious gatherings and see the abuse of COVID-19 protocol over there. And we're seeing, can our own broadcasting media do what they're doing abroad? Sometimes we see images of defaulters on international television where they are exposed and condemned by the media. For instance, there was a recent case of young people. You know, they used to think that they were immune to the virus until recently when it began attacking them also. And young people were in their nightclub dancing away, and the media were able to show them and condemn that kind of action. Can our own broadcast media find the courage to condemn such practices and reprimand religious leaders? I think that's where it is really bad. In a church I went to recently, a burial ceremony, they were sitting about 9. You know how the church pew is? They were sitting about 9 on one bench without any kind of covering on their faces. So we are saying, can we find the courage to reprimand or criticize our religious leaders? How do we do that sensitively without provoking the kind of crisis that fanatics can unleash? Quite often, even minimal required criticism can unleash senseless violence by religious fanatics. We need to do this with caution. A lot of skillful behavior change communication is needed here. How do we do this to stop the unbelief among Nigerians? How do we stop stigmatization? Perhaps testimonials in broadcasting media could help. In this section, there's a lot of stigmatization. You can't imagine my joy when I had a young doctor there saying that the first stage, if your immune system is not compromised, you may not progress, am I right, to the next stage. Nigerians do not know this, generally. They think that once you get it, you're dead. It's a death sentence. But if they know that if they can boost their immune system, it may not allow them to get into the next stage. How do we say this? How do we tell them this? Complacency among Nigerians. So we have to find the courage to please tell people who go to mosques or religious gatherings to be careful. Then also, complacency among Nigerians with regard to the COVID pandemic is being fueled by unscrupulous state governors. Can we handle them? Where there is there are states here where there is no testing going on. And even when the testing is going on, it's so minimal. You cannot come up as a governor and say, oh, my state is coronavirus free. Oh, the infection is low, because you're not testing anybody. Many states do not have testing centers. They have to go to, from my area, they have to go to Eroa and the rest of them. How much does a testing center cost? That a whole state government cannot establish one? So you cannot come and claim. And the figures are so low in some states. And I know it is not true. If you look at Lagos, they say, oh, Lagos is filled with coronavirus. It's not true because they are testing. And that's why they're finding them out. So unless we test. Now, because the figures are so low, even at the beginning, some states claimed there was no coronavirus when there was no testing at all. And that initial error sensitized many people to say this thing is not here. So even when you are preaching now, it's difficult to change that, you know what we call primacy effect? When you are speaking, the first person who speaks will have taken over the minds of the people, so that those who are speaking after may have a difficult time challenging what the original belief is. It happened. Many governors made pronouncements. They were pretending, propagandizing that there was no, if there's COVID-19 infection in the states, how does it affect the governor? Does it diminish your authority? It does not. So we are saying all this has damaged our response to the virus. Then, going forward, does the NBC, as part of its broadcast reforms, see any role for itself in the face of these gaps in the coverage? And my answer is yes. Given the devastating effects of COVID-19 pandemic as a crisis, disaster, and emergency, NBC reform should go a step further by stipulating that coverage of crisis, disaster, and the rest of them should involve more than providing basic information. Nigeria's broadcast media should advance to the higher level of life-saving, comprehensive coverage at this time that the virus, nobody knows how long it's going to be here. And behavior change communication, like I said earlier, has to be intensified. The heartwarming ongoing reposition of the NBC in virtually every aspect should empower the Commission for more powerful performance. And like I said earlier, above all, with a thoroughbred professional like Professor Dajaba at the helm of affairs, the NBC is in good hands. Let me end again by speaking a little bit about behavior change communication. Testimonials. Can we not find those who have survived the virus, and many are surviving it, to give testimonials on the broadcast media? Sometimes people, again, I keep giving an example from my own culture. The culture of Nigerians is fueling this virus. In my place, if they say maybe your father died of coronavirus or your mother, they'll tell you your girls won't even get married. They won't find husbands, in quotes, because nobody will marry them because their father died of COVID. These are entrenched beliefs. And I'm thinking testimonials from stakeholders, opinion leaders. Suppose in my place, the Igwe, that is the traditional ruler, is powerful. If he makes a pronouncement, if you will agree to come to radio or TV and make a pronouncement that this thing is real, they might believe him. Even if he doesn't come to TV, you can tape and then pronounce, say, the Igwe said this. So I think we need a lot of testimonials, particularly from those who have survived the virus, to show it is no death sentence. Altogether, ultimately, I think we have done well. But we need to do some more. I would love the discussants to please raise issues about how we can, given our culture, in the advanced world, it won't be a difficulty. You can simply say this thing is real, and people will believe it is real and take precaution. But our own, how do we overcome cultural barriers? How do we use testimonials from people who matter? Our people who depend on important people, important politicians. Are there no politicians who have survived this thing? Can't they come and talk about this openly? We need to do this, otherwise, I think we are lucky. Maybe the vitamin D in the sunshine is helping us, but it may not always help. So let's try and put in place other supporting activities to support the vitamins D and zinc. Aha. All right, finally, thank you for your attention.
You can't expect less from the first female professor of mass communication, Professor Chinyere Okunna. She has raised a lot of questions, and this is what the regulator is trying to achieve, moving forward, moving the Nigerian broadcasting industry forward. And she has raised a lot of questions, in which in no distant time, discussants also, who are also stakeholders in this industry, will be finding answers to some of the questions she has raised in her paper. A very wonderful paper, you might call it. And she tried to look at a lot of issues, and also at the end, providing solutions to some of the things we need to do as a country in order to get things working for us. And not forgetting also mentioning opinion leaders in trying to also carry some of these messages of emergencies, especially the COVID-19 in which we are currently battling as a nation. And I think the discussants will be coming on board shortly to look at some of the questions she has raised. And of course, these discussants are in their own right veterans in the industry, some intellectuals from the academia, and also we will be expecting more also in terms of clarity and also answers to some of the questions she has raised as far as this topic is concerned: broadcasting reforms and coverage of crises, disasters, and emergencies.
It's nice to be here again, and I'm very happy to be within the family once more and ready to do the things that we like doing the most. I will not waste much time. We have a program ahead of us, and I'm going to go strictly by the program. What I'm going to do is, with the remaining time that we have, each discussant will, in the first instance, get a chance to speak for 5 minutes. And then, if we have enough time, there will be a time for rebuttal. But the first opportunity to speak will be for just 5 minutes. I will save the time usually spent in introductions, because thank God Tokwe has already done quite a lot of the introductions at the beginning. So, and the people that are here, doing this presentation really don't need much of an introduction. So I'll start by inviting the Director General of the Abubakar Rimi Television and the first female chairman of BON, Broadcasting Organizations of Nigeria, Hajia Sa'a Ibrahim, to make the first presentation.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. And like I said before we stepped in, I have been promised an award for always attending MBC meeting, and I'm still waiting to be given that award. Thank you, Ma, for the wonderful presentation. I want to begin by saying that the media has done wonderfully well, like you have acknowledged in the presentation. And even though the media was among those hardest hit by COVID-19, but as provided in the MB Code that we are expected to rise to the occasion, we did just that. You raised quite a number of questions about the performance of the broadcast industry. And I want to begin by saying that just this morning on my flight to Abuja, when the shuttle of flights, the embargo was lifted, there was strict compliance of the protocol. My first flight into Abuja, we had 2 people sitting in a row, and then you are asked to sit. You only get up to come down when the person next to you, ahead of you, has stepped down. But today, this morning, it was back to business normal. There were 3 people seated on each row, and before the flight got to a stop, everybody had stood up, pulled his hand luggages, and rushing to come down. Now, are we saying that the broadcasters have failed in this direction? No, I think it is in the issue of implementation. We have raised enough information, we have given enough information, but the issue of compliance should also be saddled with other agencies of the government. And we also had to contend during the pandemic. We had to contend with the issue of privacy. You have to respect the privacy of those who have come down with the virus. So while we were doing a lot of sensitization programs, live programs, inviting people, talking about it, we were not able to go into the isolation centers to bring real life those people who have come down with the virus. There were a lot of questions. When we do live programs, people call in to ask whether this is for real, because the few times they show people in isolation centers. They show them sitting, eating, somewhere even dancing in some isolation centers. So that helped in creating some doubts in the minds of a lot of people. We were able to find our way into the isolation centers, but we were asked to be very careful in respecting the privacy of those who were there. So we had some challenges, but again, I agree with you that we need to do more, and we've been doing that by engaging influencers in the community. Where we have done our best, we also go to people who influence decision. Those are in the traditional and religious cycle, who we give them some segments through which they should talk to their followers so that people will know that these are for real. And the NBC should also do more, because it's not just about giving, making provisions for the way broadcast stations should do business during emergencies. They should also provide certain things that will enhance our duty as broadcasters. When the pandemic set in, most stations were battling with how to protect themselves, because you have to be alive to report anyway. And you are battling with revenue which has crashed. You have to bring out, the government, remember, the country was in complete lockdown, but broadcasters had to come out in order to provide that sensitization programs. You have to provide certain incentives for your members of staff who you have pulled out of their homes to put them on the line. And so while the economy has gone down, our expenses rather increased. And we haven't been given any special support in terms of how we do our operations during the pandemic. And NBC should, as our father and mother, should be able to speak for us. It's not just about reforms or compliance to the reforms NBC has, but we should also, NBC should ensure that broadcast stations are alive, because we have to be there for you to regulate. If we are not, if broadcast stations have gone down, who are you going to regulate? And we also have youth and other critical stakeholders that we engage in the issue of. Thank you. Okay, I will also have just been informed that my time is almost up. But I also quickly want to run through the reforms. I also want to see reforms take place in NBC in the area of training and workshops. This has gone down from what we know in those days. Training, the early broadcasters have enjoyed series of trainings in collaboration with international agencies. But today, it's fizzling out. NBC should please ensure that we do that as we do some reforms. The issue of exclusivity, I think for us in broadcasting organization, I think it deserves to be looked into again, because you have to do regulations that will not be counterproductive. You should carry everybody along. And in doing so, we shouldn't encourage people trying to ride on others' efforts. We should have a situation where everybody will have a stake and will perform his own duty well.
I'm afraid I have to, have to stop you.
I will rush.
You will have another chance,
Thank you.
A second time. I'm sorry,
all right, thank
but
you.
I've been trying to draw your attention.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. If we are going by the program, you'll find that our next speaker is a broadcaster, is a writer, is a poet, is a compere par excellence, public speaker, mentor to growing to young writers, educator, public servant. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome one of the most recognizable faces in Nigeria, Mrs. Eugenia Abu.
Thank you very much, Malam Awalu. Without much ado, considering our time challenges, I'll go straight on to make my intervention. I would like to use 20 seconds to congratulate the NBC at this 6th annual lecture and for choosing a theme in tandem with the times. I would also like to thank them for bringing my friend and sister, whom I haven't seen in a decade, a prolific and forward-looking professor of mass communication, Professor Okunna, to deliver this year's lecture. Her paper, as is expected, has not only looked at broadcasting reforms from digitization, which is basically audio fidelity and visual clarity, but she has also looked at deregulation and the democratization of the broadcast space. She has taken time to look at convergence of mass media forms and the role of social media in today's brave and ever-changing world. But her keynote also dwells extensively on disaster management and emergencies and crisis communication. And she adds for good measure that the global pandemic, the coronavirus, is a national emergency that requires more from broadcast practitioners and regulations alike. Hajiya Sa'a has looked at those areas and the challenges of broadcasters in reaching out to do a little more because they have done fairly well. In addressing all the issues, she has also brought to the table quotations from the National Broadcast Code and looked at its provisions for the various threads of the topic at hand. Professor Okunna has done justice to her paper, allowing the rest of us to look closely at the topic. There are quite a number of persons who have called in, taking umbrage with some portions of your paper, but there are those who have also called in to congratulate you. So basically, it's a balancing thing, and you know when you deliver a keynote, there will be people who have things to say about it. At the back of our minds as we discuss this paper, we must remember, as Professor Okunna rightly said, the media is at once teacher and agenda setter. Broadcasters not only provide information in times of disaster, but they also become the psychological companion for many citizens who need assurances in the face of a pandemic that has rendered many homeless and in dire straits. The code provides that as a tool of information, we do not cross ethical lines, but be sensitive to the people most in distress. But are we? A lot of the times, we go forward and then we step backwards, and from time to time, a few, not all broadcasters, for commercial purposes and for drumming up information and drawing more attention to themselves, may, in fact, go beyond what is expected in times that require sensitivity. But we'll look at that as we go forward. Let us take a look at another pandemic, which the good professor did not discuss, which has overtaken the nation and rendered us pretty much at the lower rung of nation states, rape. And I think it's an area that we must consider a pandemic in this country. When she says that when you look at the areas of disaster management, it's sudden serious issues that require close attention. I think rape is one of them. Let's pause a little and see how other broadcasters deal with disasters and emergencies. Do we have a disaster management plan? What about crisis communication ahead of the disaster? Many broadcast institutions do not have these plans in place because what you do is you go back into your box, pick them out, and begin to activate them. As we know, these things are things that require attention. With the 1 minute I have, I'd like to talk about how do we deal with broadcast institutions when we say they are not doing enough. One, ownership of broadcast institutions. These days, if you have enough money, you don't have to be a broadcaster. You can own one. And core broadcasters are the ones who should direct you. And a lot of times, religious leaders own broadcast institutions. So they cross the lines by themselves. And NBC needs to look very closely. Training. Already Hajiya Sa'a has talked about that. How much have we given our broadcasters to be able to do what we ask them to do? How much equipment do they have? How much welfare? I see the Honorable Minister in some conversations with Professor Idachaba has said, can you improve the welfare of NBC, of staff? Can we improve the welfare of broadcasters across board? because they don't have enough to do what we're asking them to do. They don't have the equipment, they don't have the wherewithal. How do you expect them to go out there and do what you want them to do when they are not really armed to do it? We must look at the national question. I was in Mombasa, and I crave your indulgence for a further 30 seconds. I was in Mombasa, and Tokpe, who is our master of ceremony, was there with me at an international conference. And I was surprised to find that when I complained about a chef, about a waiter who didn't deliver on promise what I wanted, a Kenyan academic sitting beside me decided that it was his matter, that he was going to stand up and deal with it, and that it was not only the matter of the waiter, but it was a national question. And he says, it's a Kenyan matter, madam, you are Nigerian, we have to fix it. The Nigerian narrative needs shifting. We complain, we abuse our nation, we don't stand up for our nation. And I think it's critical that we begin to look at those areas. Best practices from other countries, OTT, over-the-top content, the tyranny and blessings of convergence, and the troubling issue of regulating the internet, a matter that is before Professor Armstrong. And finally, I think it is important for us to note the many blessings of content that Nigeria has that is attracting the international community. Our wedding, our food. We need to benefit from those as broadcasters, and I think the time is now.
Thank you very much. I will reduce or rather limit my own commentaries and allow the speakers to speak. So I will go to the next lined up speaker, and we have somebody who rose from reporter in a state-owned newspaper to the dean of a faculty in one of the foremost universities in the country. Professor of Development Communication in University of Maiduguri, who is now the Dean of Social Sciences in the same university, and a man who has been around in the academic experience and who has done a lot of work, including consulting for international organizations, as well as being head of department of mass communication, and also being the immediate past coordinator of ACCE, Professor Njuma Gambo.
The special guest of honor, the Honorable Minister, the Chairman Board, the Acting DG, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me use 5 seconds to commend our mother in the communication community for this theoretically and practically very, very enriching presentation. Prof. Ma, thank you so much. I will quickly speak to 3 issues given the time limit. First, I want to speak to the issue of reform. There's no way we finish talking about COVID-19 without talking about the recent reform by the National Broadcasting Commission as led by the Federal Ministry of Information. First, I think that our reaction to the reform has revealed quite a lot of things. One is the inadequacy of understanding the reality that reform is inevitable. There's no society that can progress without reform. It's inevitable. It is imperfect. There's no perfect reform. It is inconclusive. It will continue to come. Sometimes it is irritating because those who are going to be affected by the reform will react. And that is what we have seen. Unfortunately, the kind of reaction we've seen is really quite worrisome. And it leads us to ask, in whose interest? Is it in the national interest? Is it in the public interest? Or in the private interest? what we see in the reform are very positive. There are many positive things in the reform. There are also difficult things. There are difficult things because they border on the principles of democracy, freedom of speech, and all that. And therefore, they should have been handled differently. For any reform to make sense, the philosophical foundation of that report needs to be established firmly. The major gap that we have in Nigeria today is that we are still struggling to bring out the updated, revised national mass communication policy. If we don't bring it out, any kind of reform that we want to implement in this industry will still remain in a vacuum. Where is the national mass communication policy? Because that is the philosophical basis for the reform. 2, why are we singling out broadcasting? When you have the print media, you have advertising, you have public relations, you have the internet. Why are you singling out broadcasting? Hate speech is an issue that is beyond the Commission. The Commission will continue to burn its fingers if it insists on doing it alone. Because hate speech, fake news are phenomena that are multifaceted. So they will require a national approach. Engineer, thank you very much for this. There's supposed to be a national approach. Unfortunately, when the National Assembly started talking about hate speech, the idea was shut down. Because until we agree as a nation on a definition of hate speech, fake news, it will be difficult for the Commission to single itself out and deal with the matter. So we need a holistic approach. That is one. The second point I want to make, which was addressed by Professor Okunda, is that the media are powerful. Yes, they are powerful. But why have they not succeeded in changing Nigerians? If they are so powerful. I think part of it lies in theory, as you know, Prof. Maybe Nigerians have been inoculated somehow. They will not take information like that. Especially information from government, because they don't seem to trust it. They won't take. 2, Nigerians are gullible because they can take rumors, start taking salt because somebody said there was Ebola. Many people took salt and died in this country. Why are we so gullible? I think we need evidence. I think that the Commission can lead in this direction because we are talking about broadcasting. Unfortunately, that capacity is not there. The Commission needs to build capacity to do evidence regulation. Evidence-based regulation is the way forward. Evidence-based regulation. Finally, asking a question on how we go about it. Yes, I think that right from the beginning, if we had wanted the help of religious leaders and traditional rulers, we should have carried them along in constituting the presidential task force. But they are not visible there. And then along the line, mosques and churches were shut down. And even as we are talking today, there are exchanges between the religious community and the policy platform. That is not good. And the pandemic is ravaging the world. So I think that we need to look at the structural issue in terms of the composition of the various structures that are handling the campaign as to whether the Commission can make media organizations to do certain things I doubt much. Going by what we see, the commission is undergoing very traumatizing experience. There seems to be a deliberate campaign to demonize the commission, to discourage the commission, to demoralize the commission. But the broadcast industry needs the commission. The commission needs to be credible. It needs to have capacity to do certain things. It needs to be a brand that should be respected, but it needs to earn that reputation. I find it very difficult to understand a situation in which the regulator becomes regulated. You are the regulator, you make a rule, and then somebody says no. Finally, moderator, I think there are national security issues in this. Because if any sector, whether we call it private sector or whatever, can determine what the state should do and get away with it, when it's all responsibilities, pay license fees, you will not pay. And then a rule is set. You applied for a license. You are given the license. There are terms attached to the license. You refuse to fulfill the requirements. Then you form a power block. Tomorrow we will see that power block appointing the DG and the minister. So it's a national security issue. I am not saying that there is justification for the methodology that has been used in doing the reform. That is another issue. But that should not be allowed to happen in this country.
You can never miss the passion when Professor Gambo begins to speak about national issues. And that has always been him. Whenever he comes up, the kind of passion he exhibits is always very touching. I wish I didn't have to stop him. But we have a tyrant that's controlling us called time. So I will now go to Dr. Amechi Anakwe, who has been in the trenches for 20 years, who has anchored so many programs on AIT, who has a doctorate degree in political economy and a master's degree in international relations, and who is a writer, already written The Politics of Economic Regulation in Nigeria, and we are expecting very soon the state of economic development in Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Amechi Anakwe.
Thank you so much. Crises, disasters, and emergencies, Professor Okona said, let's reduce it to COVID-19 because it's what has opened all our eyes towards the need to indeed ensure effective coverage and reportage of all this. Of course, COVID-19 is an eye-opener for everybody. No wonder the regulatory body for broadcasting industry in Nigeria, NBC, decided to pick the issue of broadcasting reforms and coverage of crises and disasters and emergencies as topic for their annual lecture. Is apt. When in the operation of a society, you tend to see gaps. The critical question is, what are you doing as a society to deal with these gaps, resolve notice problems, and achieve a higher order? So I congratulate the MBC for choosing this topic. And Professor Okona challenged us, the discussants, to indeed come up with additional reforms, propose additional reforms that could be implemented to ensure a greater and more efficient coverage of crisis, disasters, and emergencies by the broadcast industry. I'm going to categorize them into three areas. The three different bodies that are involved in the broadcast sector, except we aggregate all their roles and functions and see how each, what reforms each can bring in, we may not achieve our objectives. I'm talking of the government in terms of policies and programs, the regulatory institutions in terms of regulatory decisions and actions, and of course the broadcast industry in terms of the actual operation of the industry. The reforms are needed in these three areas to achieve the aim here. Let's start with the broadcast stations. Mrs. Abu talked about before the crisis, the plans we are making. I'll get to that very quickly. Plans for coverage. I think that the objective of the media, especially the broadcast industry, is to indeed influence government policies and programs. And if we are to indeed do so much about coverage of disasters, crises, and emergencies, we need to begin to take steps to, as the broadcast industry, to prevent disasters, emergencies, and crises, and where we can prevent them, to manage them very efficiently. And that's of course, the government takes the lead in all this. What should we do as a broadcast industry to remind government of its responsibilities to prevent disasters, crises, and emergencies, and to adequately resolve them when they come? We have to put the issue on the table. I call it mainstreaming coverage of disasters, emergencies and emergencies, and emergencies into our editorial policy. How do we indeed do this? Hold government accountable. If there are instances, for instance, the Nigerian health system is said to be weak, did we do enough to put it on the front burner to remind the government of the need to put more money in the health sector, strengthen it, and make it ready to undertake any eventuality? Yes, some people did, some broadcast stations did, but was this sustained in such a way that the government will be forced to begin to take action? When we do it, we are trying to prevent, and when we can prevent, we are trying to put our country in a position to deal with the emergencies. We have a reacted knee-jerk approach to building molecular laboratories across the country and all that. It tells us that if we as the broadcast industry put more pressure on the government, perhaps going forward, not just for this COVID-19, more will come, more crises will come, more pandemic will come, more crisis will come. Of course, crisis is endemic in the country, as it were, religious, economic, political, and name them. So we mainstream coverage of disasters and election in our editorial policy. Each broadcast station should highlight the steps to be taken in the event of a disaster. Who are those to cover? Is it the environment, climate change? Is it the defense correspondent? We should have all this ready. Mrs. Eugenia Abu made reference to it. We shouldn't wait for it to happen before we begin to react to it. So we have a duty to draw government attention to all this, and advocacy and editorial policy to prevent and ensure that the country is better placed to prevent and deal with crises, emergencies, and indeed disasters. These are what the media houses should do, the broadcast house, ensuring an in-house plan for the coverage of crises and disasters are put in place. For the regulator, yes, in section 1.2 of the broadcast code, provisions were made and guidelines were made for coverage of crises and all that. Broadcast stations in Nigeria were discouraged from engaging in sensationalism and to expect high level of sensitivity during emergencies. It also demands credibility and corporate social responsibility, especially on public announcements on the part of broadcast station. I believe for the regulator, there's a responsibility for it to draw up an emergency response mode for broadcasters. In time of emergency, in time of crisis, in times of disaster, there should be an emergency mode where broadcast stations will just click on. We saw it with COVID. Most stations changed their reportage and programming to accommodate new programs to educate and inform the people. If the regulator will indeed be at the driver's seat towards designing an emergency broadcast mode, but I must also state clearly that in designing this emergency broadcast mode, a whole lot of input should be gotten from the broadcast stations because they are the ones that would operate it. They must make input, and apart from the general broadcast mode, we must also indeed allow the different stations to bring in their different specific style to avoid monotony and to give them time to maneuver. That's for, of course, before then, financial compensation package, as we go into this mode, it will mean loss of revenue for the brokers, as most of them that are privately owned. We should design it to indeed encourage them to do that. Lastly, for the government, review the many disaster and pandemic response plans developed by the National Emergency Management Agency. There are so many of them. If you study these many disaster and pandemic response plan, I can quickly name some of them. National Disaster Response Plan, Search and Rescue and Epidemic Devastation Plan, the National Disaster Management Framework, Nigeria National Pandemic Influenza Preparedness and Response Plan, as well as Nigeria National Pandemic Plan. Most of these plans made passing remarks about the involvement of the media, especially the broadcast media, in sending out critical information and managing the entire public relations during crisis. And as I conclude now, most of these plans are yet to get Federal Executive Council approval. Just one or two. The ideal situation is to further pass, apart from getting cabinet approval, pass them into legislation so that we have that strength to indeed put them in. The broadcast agencies must come in, and feedback is essential so that Professor Gambo talked about, is it Professor Gambo? Some committees like the PTA of the media, broadcast media, being part of it, and to ensure that feedback is necessary. I think we spend most of our time during this period,
Thank you very
just
much,
one second, talking about educating people on how to implement the safety protocols when they don't believe in COVID-19. We should have spent time telling them that COVID-19 exists. It's only when they accept that will go to the second level. These are what feedbacks will guarantee if we build them into our communication strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I have to play the back.
Here at the NBC 6th Annual Lecture 2020 here in Abuja, the nation's capital. And discussants have also given their own insight into the issue through cross-fertilization of ideas with suggestions on the way forward for the broadcast industry. Don't forget, this is part of the 28th anniversary of the NBC. Exactly 28 years today. It was established through Decree 38 of 1992, which was later amended by an act of the National Assembly. At this time, we want to thank you for your time as we return you to our studio for the continuation of other programs. On behalf of the entire outside broadcast crew, I am Abdullahi Ajia saying bye for now.
You can follow us on all our social media platforms: Facebook at NTA Network News, Instagram at NTA Network, Twitter at NTA, YouTube